right, well, welcome everybody. I'm really glad that you're here for our AAC training. I'm going to just share my PowerPoint with you so you can kind of have a visual of what we're talking about. But we figured that because it is the beginning of the new clinical year, it would be a really good time to just kind of have a refresher course or an introductory course to anyone who's not that familiar with augmentative and alternative communication. For some of you, you may already be familiar with some of this. For others, maybe not. But I just want you to feel really comfortable to ask any questions, interrupt me at any time. I would love to discuss any questions or comments that you might have, okay? Let's get going. Basically, in this presentation, what we're going to cover is going to talk about what is AAC, that augmentative alternative communication that I was talking about. So what exactly is it? What are the different kinds? Who uses it? Why is it important? And how can we, as parents, best implement AAC for our children? So first things first, just to kind of lay the groundwork for this, AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. When we talk about augmentative, what we mean is it's something that augments or supplements our verbal speech. That could be something like a gesture or sign language or facial expressions, right? Those are things that augment what we are verbally saying. Alternative means something that replaces or is instead of verbal speech. So that might be using a tablet to communicate, an iPad, using a PECS system, which I will explain what that is later if you're unfamiliar with that. So AAC is basically something that either augments or is in place of our verbal speech to help facilitate greater communication. Now, there's different kinds of AAC, augmentative alternative communication. There's different kinds, and we tend to use all these different kinds in combination. So we have no-tech AAC, low tech, and high tech. No tech is something that really doesn't require extra equipment. So again, it's kind of those pointing to something that we want, using gestures to kind of portray what we're thinking, using facial expressions or sign language. That's our no tech, augmentative, or low tech, on the other hand, is something that usually we can physically hold but doesn't require a battery. So that could be something like a signal book. Not sure, my screen might be too small, the video of me. Something like this that has little visuals that we can hold and request using laminated pictures. It could be using writing, texting. I guess that would be high tech, using an alphabet board, etc. And then we do have our high-tech AAC systems. Those are the systems that use technology. So again, using iPads with software on it that allows us to communicate, using telephones, using dedicated AAC systems. We'll talk more about what we use here at Pingree primarily, but just so you know, we do kind of use a combination of everything. And even as people who do use verbal communication, we use AAC quite a bit in our daily lives, whether it is using those hand gestures or using our cell phone to text a friend, whatever it may be. We also use AAC too in our day-to-day lives. The question, though, is who uses AAC? Basically, in a clinical kind of therapeutic setting, anyone who cannot meet their daily needs with spoken language alone would probably benefit from AAC. That includes our clients and kiddos that have very limited verbal speech or maybe no verbal speech. It also includes individuals that are a little bit difficult to understand. The main thing here is that when our clients or children don't have verbal speech as their primary communication option, it's really important that we provide another option for them in order to be able to express themselves, whether it's requesting for items, whether it is sharing thoughts or ideas or making statements or asking questions, right? We need to provide some form of communication for our kiddos. And when verbal speech isn't always the first option, we want to find something else that's going to work. At the base of everything I do is this concept, and it goes right along with what I was just saying, which is that communication is a fundamental human right. We need to find ways to help people who aren't communicating in the usual way, find a way for them to have a really successful communication option through AAC use, okay? For our clients who would benefit from AAC, augmentative alternative communication, there's a lot of research that has kind of shown us how we can best implement these AAC systems with our clients. And so we're going to dive into that. But first, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the AAC options that we use use heavily here at Pingree. The first is PECS, and you can see the picture here. This is it stands for Picture Exchange Communication Symbol. And as you can see, we have like a little piece of paper with some Velcro on it and some laminated symbol pictures. And basically what a child will do when they're learning to use PECS, the very first thing is they will take their desired item, whether it's, bored chips or Cheetos or, playing outside or recess. They'll take the symbol that corresponds with what they want, give it to their either parent or teacher or clinician in exchange for that item, right? And then we can build from there to make it much more complex and share more complex ideas than just requesting. But that is the basics of PECS. It's a low-tech option. We often will have these little mini scraping binders, and inside of them, we will put many pages with their preferred items, with items they're learning, new vocabulary. And again, it's a little Velcro piece of paper that they can exchange what they want. And then, as I said before, we can expand. So that is one AAC method that we use quite a bit at Pingree. Another one, a more high-tech option that is beneficial to a lot of our kiddos, is Cough Drop. And this is a computer software that we download onto either an iPad. This is what a lot of the kids will have at Pingree. Basically, we download it onto iPad, a tablet, computer, cell phone, whatever. And basically how this works is if you click on each individual symbol, the software will then speak that word aloud. So the child can learn to identify either by the word or the picture, the symbol that they would like to be spoken for them. I think right now I want to just show you, I'm going to exit my PowerPoint and just show you in real time on my computer kind of how this works. I know we have a couple people on tonight that haven't used Cough Drop before. It's a really great AAC system, and it's really quite user-friendly once you kind of familiarize yourself with it. But as you can see, when you pull up a child's Cough Drop board, we will have already created a board for them and customized it. This is a very general board, but we can make it very individualized to each child, collaborate with family, with teachers, and myself. What you do when you open it right now, it's in speak mode. And so if I click on the button, it's going to say it aloud for me. So I might be hungry and I might say, eat, and it will say eat for me, okay? So just so you can kind of see, you can click all these buttons. You could say, I want to play, etc. So that's kind of how Cough Drop works. We can go in on the back end, and I'll just kind of show you what this looks like. We can also edit our boards if we want to change the pictures, if we want to change the colors, if we need to put a new symbol in, change the words, etc. So just so you can kind of see what Cough Drop looks like, how it's used. This is very brief. We're not going to get into the details, the technical details of Cough Drop, but that's something that you can definitely reach out to me for, or your child's behavior specialist. That is the basics of Cough Drop. So again, we use PECS and Cough Drop quite a bit. Of course, we also use Sign and other picture options for AAC too. But now we kind of have a basic idea of our PECS system and our Cough system and what that looks like. I want to talk a little bit about how we can best implement these systems with our kids. And like I said earlier, there is a lot of research to support these 4 best practices for implementing AAC with our clients, with our children, at school, at home, in the community. This research has kind of been combined into the 4 best practices, okay? And so we're going to dive into each of those, but just so you have a basic overview of what those are, first things first is we want to make sure our clients and our children have access to their AAC systems, whether it's PECS, whether it's Cough Drop, or other picture symbol system. For the ease of this presentation, I'm going to refer mostly to Cough Drop to give examples of how we could be implementing it. But first things first, they need access to their system, because if they don't have access, they're not going to learn how to use it, right? Second step is we need to be modeling how to use their AAC system for them. We also need to be using the right kind of vocabulary to kind of expand and make more complex communication utterances, right? And then we want to also, lastly, be providing communication opportunities for our children to be using their AAC system. So let's get a little bit more into this. One thing to keep in mind too, if you're new to using an AAC system, it can really seem overwhelming. And I would say take it one step at a time. We don't have to be perfect at all these different steps, This comes with time, and as you become more comfortable with your AAC system that your child uses, it'll just become more natural. So I wouldn't be worried if it seems confusing or frustrating or overwhelming at first. That's normal and totally eases with time. But like I said, first step when we're implementing AAC is we want to make sure that our kids have access to their systems. Okay, so what that means is that an individual or a child should be able to touch, interact with, and use their AAC systems at all times, okay? They need access regardless of the activity, regardless of their behaviors or their current skill level with the system, because when it comes down to it, it is their voice, right? And so we don't want to take that away. We really try to encourage teachers, parents to keep the iPad, if that's what you're using, out at all times. Don't keep it in the backpack or on the shelf or in the car. Let's have it out and ready for our kids to use, okay? Again, just to kind of get that point home, you want to make sure it's out at all times, but I also am really aware that that's often easier said than done. Some kids are highly motivated by iPads and they want to play games on them, and that can cause a behavior if they're trying to get onto if you're wanting them to use their AAC talk and they're wanting to play a game or something, right? And so there's things that we can talk about. There's ways that we give strategies for that, I guess. And, one thing to know is there are certain access blocks that we can use on iPads to make it very dedicated just an iPad and a game iPad, if that's a financial option. But there's a lot of ways that we can kind of work with those difficulties that you might foresee. And that's something that we would talk a little bit more about one-on-one, individualized to your child. Okay, so if you foresee that maybe using an iPad or whatever AAC system we're talking about be a little difficult, that's something that we'd want to talk about and work through. Okay, so at the core of all that, we want to make sure that our kids have access to their system so they can learn to use it. Okay, we also want to model how to use their system. I kind of like to liken this to learning a new language. When we learn a language and say we're learning a new language, it involves a significant amount of input before we'd ever be able or expected to have any output or be able to actually speak the language, right? So that's kind of the same with AAC. They need to be getting a lot of input and examples of how they're supposed to be using their cough drop or their AAC system before we would really expect them to be able to use it functionally or effectively on their own. And additionally, when we are actually using their AAC system, say I have my cough drop board and I'm modeling what I'm saying to my child, that's also showing them that it's a valid way of communicating and that we are encouraging them to use it too. Modeling using an AAC means that you use the communication system while you talk to show how it can be used, okay? So I'm just going to give you an example of this. I have my AAC board right here and say, this is my child's AAC. Hopefully you can kind of see it in the video. I might say, you know what, it's dinner time. I think it's time to eat. I might say, let's go eat, right? So I'm modeling as I'm saying it. Or if it's time to go to the playground or something, I might say, hey, let's go play. Or I might have a question, what do you want to do? And I might say, right? And so basically, it takes a little time to get used to where the buttons are and how you might kind of reword things for what buttons you have available, what words you have available. But if we can model how to use it, our kids are going to pick up on it a lot faster. So I want to just share a little video that kind of illustrates this point, only 2 minutes, and just kind of shows the importance of modeling. I really like that little video because it just kind of demonstrates how through our modeling, we can really help our kids to learn how to use their AAC systems, as well as just become more proficient with them. And again, how to kind of show them that it's a valid way to communicate and that we're excited that they're using it, right? I think what I also like about that video is that it kind of demonstrates that it does take time to get to that point where we can use our AACs effectively. We don't expect our kids to be able to use them perfectly all at once, right? It takes some time. And through our modeling, that can really help them learn it better, okay? I want to share just this this statistic. I think it's pretty significant. It says, and this is from a kind of an AAC guru researcher in the speech field, but she said by 18 months, babies have heard 4,380 hours of spoken language, and we don't expect them to be fluent speakers yet. If AAC learners only see symbols modeled twice weekly for, say, 20 or 30 minutes, like they would maybe in a speech session or in a learning session with their behavior specialist, it's going to take them 84 years for them to have the same exposure to aided language as an 18-month-old has to spoken language. And that's dramatic, but it shows a point how important it is to be modeling as consistently as possible with our children, because they really do, like I said earlier, they need that input for them to then be able to have the output to be able to speak using their AAC systems, okay? And so what I want to do is I'm pulling up this cough drop word here, the one we saw a little bit earlier. And if someone's willing, or if a couple people are willing, I would love for you to show me how you might model some phrases that I'm going to give you, just so you can kind of get it in your system of how we can be modeling AAC communication for our children, okay? So I'll give you an example first. If I was using this cough drop word with one of my clients, and let's say it was time for lunch, I might say, hey, it's time for lunch. Let's go, if you can see my mouse, let's go eat, right? Or you might say, I want to eat, right? You can even ask a question, are you hungry? Do you want to eat? And then maybe they'd say yes, or maybe they'd say no, right? So that's kind of how we're modeling as the day goes on, right? So how about this? If you're comfortable, great. If not, no worries. I'll give a few examples and we'll move on. But let's say it was time for recess, or it was time to go play at the park or in the backyard. What is one way that you could communicate that to your child using these symbols that we have here? And it could be one word, 2, 3, whatever you think. Take a minute to look at the board. I'll give an example. No worries if no one wants to share. That's totally fine. I might say, let's say it's time for recess. We're here at school. I might say, hey, let's go out and play, right? So that's one idea. Maybe we're in a learning session. Maybe we're with at home with a sibling or a friend who's come over and we're working on turn taking, right? You might say, oh, right now it's your turn, right? Or you might say, hey, right now it's my turn, right? Basically, I just wanted to kind of demonstrate how you can be modeling. And of course, we don't have every single word that we're going to be saying aloud, but the important words that we have on here, we can highlight and model throughout the day, okay? So that kind of the basics of modeling. What we've talked about so far is first best practice in implementing AAC is to make sure our child has access to it. Second is that we need to be modeling how to use the system throughout the day. The third best practice is using core vocabulary, and I'm going to explain what this means. So core vocabulary is a small set of words that makes up about 80% of what we say, and it can be combined in a variety of ways. Core vocabulary, it's those words that generalize well across settings. It's not super specific words like dinosaur or unicorn, Cheetos, or fruit snacks, right? It's these words like go, yes, no, want, more, in, out, things like that. Words that we can use whether we're at the park, whether we're at school, whether we're at home or at grandma's, right? And so just kind of as an example of that, if a child learns the word go on their AAC device, then they can use that to say, hey, go there or go away or don't go, right? So they can use that in so many different settings. And so, it's kind of interesting when you think about core words, as we call them. We really do. You'll kind of notice as you talk and converse with others that really makes up a lot of what we say. And of course, those really specific words like playground or bus or dinosaur, really important too. But those are easier learned than these more general core words that are more generalizable. And so that's why we spend a little more time focusing on those, because they do generalize across settings. They are quite functional and they're a little bit harder to learn. So that's why our focus is placed there. Let me just show you right here on this board that I have with cough drop. Pretty much everything on this board is what we would consider a core vocabulary word. And just so you kind of have a reference of how this is all set up, I tend to make cough drop boards according to a certain key that we have that's shown to just really increase muscle memory. So we want to put all of our pronouns in yellow, right? We put our verbs in green, our question words in red, prepositions in blue, etc. And that way it's kind of easier to locate items based on their kind of part of speech, as well as remember, I'm always going to be able to find the word turn at the bottom. I'm always going to find want up at the top, etc. Right? That's kind of how the board is set up. But we use these 4 vocabulary words, and there's really a lot that you can say. As I was showing when I was modeling how to use the AAC, how to model it for our kids, you can really say quite a bit with a small amount of words, okay? That being said, though, those more specific words, those what we call fringe words, really important and really relevant to kids, their interests, their preferences, the things that they love to do or the things they love to have or things they love to eat, really important. So we don't want to deny them access to those really important words as well. So I'm going to show you on here the way I've set it up with pretty much all of our cough drop users at Pingree is on their main board here, we have their set of core words. This is a very general board and we make it more customized to each child, but this is just to give you an idea. Right here in the corner, if you can see where this red circle is what we call the sidebar. And if you click on it, I've made a whole bunch of folders that have context-specific vocabulary. So for example, if it was time for art, to click on the art folder and it would pull up a board that has really relevant specific words that would really mostly only be relevant to an art project, right? So we're not going to have that on the home board. We want it on the side, but we want it there when we need it, right? So we have, colors, paintbrush, paper, pencil, glue, stickers, etc., right? So I just wanted to point that out because it's really important that our kids do have access to the words that are really meaningful to them. And so we provide that, both the core and that fringe vocabulary for our kiddos. The best practices for implementing AAC: number 1, access. Number 2, model how to use their system. Number 3, really spend a lot of time working on that core vocabulary because it's a little harder to learn, but also it's more generalizable and useful across settings. And the 4th best practice that I'm going to touch on tonight is we want to provide communication opportunities for our children. When I say communication opportunities, what I mean is those are the times of day when an AAC user is given an opportunity to interact meaningfully with their system. And those opportunities can have a lot of different functions, including talking to a friend, requesting something, answering a question, giving a command, right? But when a child can use an AAC system within those meaningful, motivating communication opportunities, it really can lead to increased success and progress and just efficiency using their device, right? When it comes down to it, there's really 4 main reasons why people do communicate. So when I'm talking about communication opportunities, these are kind of the 4 categories of communication that we often will touch on, which is we want to express wants and needs, we want to get and share information, build relationships, and engage in social etiquette. And so as a child is learning to use their AAC system, we want to provide opportunities for them to use their system in these different contexts, right? And I think that especially with newer AAC users, it's really tempting to kind of just stick on requesting, I want this, I want that, I want XYZ, please, right? And that's a really good starting point because it kind of helps a child learn, oh, if I request something, I'm going to get it in return. I like using this system. So that can be a really good starting point, but we don't want to limit them just to requesting, right? We want to provide so many opportunities for them to really meaningfully use their AAC device, whether it's with a friend, greeting a friend, asking a friend to play, whether it's asking a question or whatever, right? We want to make sure that our kids are using their AAC devices in a lot of different contexts. What research has shown is that those who use AAC really need about 200 communication opportunities every day to learn their AAC system well, right? And that doesn't have to be major things that you're planning throughout the day. That can just be the chit chat that goes on. Hey, do you want to do this? Or what's your favorite, color? What do you want to eat? Let's go to the park. If you're modeling throughout the day and giving them an opportunity to respond, that's easier accomplished than it sounds when you read that number. And of course, like I said earlier, we take things step by step, by little, especially those who are new to using AAC with their children. We're just working on implementing it the best we can. And as we become comfortable with providing access to someone, to our kids, then we're going to go to the next level and try to model a little bit more. Try to use more of that vocabulary and then really try to be providing those communication opportunities. So remember, it's a step-by-step thing. We don't have to do it perfectly all at once. I would expect it would take most people time to get to the point where they're really using it well and effectively all the time with their children who use AAC. I do want to touch on this. We've talked about before our best practices for implementing AAC. When you're using an AAC system with your child, we often are going to need to prompt them how to use their AAC. A lot of kids aren't going to be sure how to use it right away, right? And that's totally fine. What research has shown, though, is that if we prompt as little as is necessary for our kids, that is more effective for them to then become more independent using their AAC system. Probably a collaborative effort figuring out about what level of prompting a child requires, right? But the first things first is no prompting, right? We give them their AAC, we kind of wait expectantly. You can kind of use some, facial expressions like, oh, I'm waiting, I'm wondering what you're gonna say, right? And then if that doesn't elicit a response for them to use their AAC, right, we can kind of indirectly prompt them, I wonder what you're going to say next, right? And then if that's not quite the level that they're at, we can give a little bit more direct prompting, like, hey, tell me what you want. Or we can model for them, you want to eat, right? And then even help them point to what they're asking for or what they're trying to say, right? So there's kind of this prompting hierarchy we like to start with as least amount of prompting as possible. And that really can help them to become more independent using their AAC because then they're not always relying heavy amounts of prompting when they're learning to just kind of use it on their own, right? So just wanted to throw that in there. And this is just an interesting quote, again, from another AAC researcher, and it illustrates a point well. He says that having a communication device doesn't make you an effective communicator any more than having a piano makes you a musician, right? We can have these items, we can really want them to work, but it's really going to take some effort on our parts and our children's parts to be able to really start to use them effectively. And that's just one thing that I wanted to throw out there. So I'm going to just kind of recap what we talked about, and then I want to open it up for questions or comments if anyone has any. But basically what we talked about is that there's 4 best practices for implementing AAC. That is providing access to our kids so they have access to their systems at all times. It's going to help them be able to learn it and use it more effectively. Second, we want to be modeling as we're speaking. We want to be modeling how they could be saying different things on their AAC device. We want to focus on those core vocabulary words. So that's less nouns, more of those generalizable words that are a little bit harder to learn, but do generalize well across settings. And then lastly, we want to set up as many meaningful communication opportunities as possible throughout the day for our children so that they can really learn to use their AAC in different contexts and with different people, right? And this really will provide the best possible environment and instruction for AAC learners to develop their skills. And so I really am an advocate of AAC because it provides such an awesome way for our kiddos to express themselves when verbal speech isn't always their first option, right? And so basically, those are the steps for implementing that I recommend based on research, as well as cough drop and PECS is something we do a bit here at Pingree. That is what I wanted to share today, but I would really love it if anyone has questions. I'd really love to answer any questions that you may have either about implementing about cough drop, about PECs. We'll spend a few minutes here if anyone has questions. If not, that's fine. But go ahead and ask questions if you have them. It says, do you feel like the AAC will help them actually speak words? This is a really awesome question, and it's a very common concern that parents will have because a lot of times they feel like, oh, if we use an AAC system, is it going to be replacing their verbal speech? But research shows, the best research we have shows that using an AAC does not inhibit verbal language development. And in many cases, it actually can support language development. One thing that's really awesome, they were using like an AAC system like cough drop. If they're using their system and they're pointing to buttons and they're hearing it, they're getting increased auditory input. And that's going to help them be more likely to then verbalize in the future. And that's something I've seen over my course of working here at Pingree and using AAC over the years, that it does not tend to inhibit language at all. In fact, it usually enhances language development over a period of time. It definitely can help a child learn to verbally speak. Thanks for that question. Any other questions before we wrap it up? Okay, I think if that's it, I am just so grateful that you guys came. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I would love to help however I can, and we'll see you later.